NAKIVO Backup and Replication is a backup solution designed specifically for service providers. Managed service providers can use the solution to offer backup as a service, replication as a service, and disaster recovery as a service. With a single multi-tenant deployment of NAKIVO Backup and Replication, you can create multiple isolated environments for your tenants. You can allow these tenants to perform backup and recovery activities through the self-service portal while remaining completely isolated from each other. This means that tenants do not have access to each other's environments or data protection activities. In this video, I will show you how, as a master tenant, you can use the role-based access control feature in NAKIVO Backup and Replication to assign roles and permissions to tenants. When you install NAKIVO Backup and Replication in multi-tenant mode, you are prompted to create a user. This user is the master administrator. This means this user can perform all possible operations in this interface of the software. The master administrator, that is the service provider, can create new tenants, navigate between tenants, and create users for the tenants. Right now, I'm acting as master administrator in my deployment of the software. Assume you have already created a master administrator user. Let's create a new tenant. To do this, click Create New Tenant. Enter the tenant's name, the number of workloads, and the number of licensed Microsoft 365 users. I'm using Customer 2 for the tenant's name. I'm also allocating 10 workloads and 10 Microsoft 365 users to this tenant. You can also add the tenant's contact information here and change the logo for this tenant. Let's proceed to the next step. Now you have to choose the infrastructure items that will be available to the tenant. The tenant will be able to back up or replicate selected infrastructure items, as well as perform recovery and replication to selected hosts, clusters, and containers. For this specific case, I'm going to allocate one ESXi host on the service provider side. And on the customer side, I'm also going to allocate the specific ESXi host. Let's move to the next step. Now you have to select which transporters will be used for this specific tenant. In this case, I'm going to choose one transporter residing on the customer side and one transporter on the service provider side. Now let's go to the next step where I can allocate the pre-created backup repository. Just like with the transporters, you can allocate the backup repository which was pre-created in the customer's environment and the backup repository on the MSP side. And the last step allows us to create a local user for this specific tenant. I'm going to create an admin account, which is the local user account for this tenant. I'm using admin_C2 for the name of this local user to reflect the tenant's name, which is Customer 2. Then I need to provide a name for this user and generate a password. You can also provide the email address and a description. Then you should select a role for this user. NAKIVO Backup and Replication provides several built-in roles: backup operator, recovery operator, self-service administrator, self-service user, and view only. The tasks users can perform are restricted by the assigned built-in roles. These built-in roles cover typical user management tasks. You can also clone, customize, and add new user roles. Let's grant this user the role of self-service administrator to allow them to perform any tasks within this tenant's isolated environment. Click Add to add the local user, which is the self-service administrator, and click Finish to finalize the tenant creation process. The tenant Customer 2 is active now, and I'm the master tenant administrator in this case, who can access this tenant and can see all the information inside. There are no jobs yet, so we can create any type of jobs here. You can go to Settings and check all the settings for a specific tenant. As you see, here's the inventory and the resources which were assigned earlier. We have the transporters and the two backup repositories. One is located on the customer side, and the other one is on the MSP side. If you go to General to see the general settings and click Users and Roles, you can see that we have administrator_C2 created. And over here, you can create additional users for the specific tenant. Let me access the same settings from the top level. On the top level of the users and roles settings, as a master administrator, you can create multiple users and assign those users to the tenants. You can also configure Active Directory integration. Let me show you how to perform integration with Active Directory. You have to provide the domain name, the IP address, domain username, and the password. Click Test Integration. The integration is successful and I can move to the next step. In my case, I'm selecting two roles, and I'm assigning the master tenant access level to those two roles with the permissions of master administrator. Click Add to process the integration. To see the added Active Directory groups, I navigate to AD Groups view, and I can see all the permissions that have been granted. As a master administrator, I can change the assigned roles to the Active Directory group. I can add a new Active Directory group. Now for the Backup Operators group, I'm going to grant the access level for the Customer 2 tenant, and I would like them to use the Recovery Operator role. Now let me switch to the Roles view. In this view, you can create new roles or modify existing ones. If I click on a built-in role, for example, Backup Operator, we can see the permissions for this role. So in this case, the built-in Backup Operator role in NAKIVO Backup and Replication restricts access to configuration and provides full access to jobs. Let me switch to another role. Here's Recovery Operator. I'll go ahead and click Show Permissions. The Recovery Operator role has custom access to configuration. It has view-only access to backup jobs, backup copy jobs, and replication jobs. However, it has full access to recovery jobs in NAKIVO Backup and Replication. You can easily create a new role from scratch by clicking Add Role and providing the required access level for that new role. Alternatively, you can select an existing role and clone that role. Let me clone this Recovery Operator role and grant this role additional rights to access backup jobs. Moreover, I'm going to create this role specifically for Customer 2, which is our newly created tenant. Let me click Show to show permissions again, find jobs, and select Full Access, and click Save. Now let me create a new user, which would be Recovery Operator C2. Then you need to provide a name, the password, and repeat the password. For access level, I can also specify that this Recovery Operator will be used only for Customer 2, and I will assign the role. I can click Show Permissions to make sure that the assigned role has access to backup jobs. As you see, it has full access. Now I'm ready to add this user. Note that I'm acting right now as Master Tenant Administrator. So let me navigate to Users and see all the users which are assigned to the tenant Customer 2. There's Self-Service Administrator with the user admin_C2. So let me use this username and act as Local Customer 2 Administrator. To do this, I'm going to open a private window. As a Master Tenant Administrator, I need to provide the URL for the Local Tenant Administrator on the Customer 2 side, which will be used to access the NAKIVO Backup and Replication environment. Now I'm acting as a local administrator, so I will use my credentials provided by the Master Tenant Administrator. And I'm going to log in to the NAKIVO Backup and Replication multi-tenant interface. The login is successful. As you can see, there are no jobs yet in this environment, so I can create any type of backup and replication jobs. I can access any settings within my own tenant, including users and roles, where I can see the Recovery Operator with the rights to access backup jobs. I can also create new users in my environment and grant them the available roles. Let me check the rest of the configuration. So I'll go to Inventory, where I see the ESXi host, which is in my environment, and the portion of vCenter server, which is on the service provider side. I can see the transporters, and I can see the repositories to which I can send my backups. Now let me switch the user to Recovery Operator. As you can see, the recovery operator has limited access to the settings. So let me click Settings, and the recovery operator can only see the available repositories. Going back to Dashboard, I'm going to try to create a backup or replication job. The backup job is available for us, but the replication job is not available as it is restricted for this role. As you've seen in this video, NAKIVO Backup and Replication allows you to create multiple users on the tenant level for each isolated tenant. And the solution also allows you to create multiple users with different roles on the master tenant level. With NAKIVO Backup and Replication, administrators can grant a single user a set of permissions to schedule and manage backups, while another user can be on call to run recoveries as needed. Assign view-only access to managers for oversight over data protection tasks, or to in-house legal staff for data compliance checks. Manage the whole process from the intuitive web interface to ensure that the roles are up to date with the changing in requirements of your customers.